You're listening to the Oh My God podcast. Here, we talk about all things godly, all things womanly, and nothing is off limits. I am Zelda Lebowitz, your host, and together with my special guest, we will begin to uncover and discover what it really means to be a Jewish woman today. See you inside. Ida Schottenstein, welcome to the Oh My God podcast.
Thank you.
Season
It's so
3.
good to be here.
So happy that you're here.
Space.
Thank you.
Love it.
Thanks. So I wanted to introduce you to the ones that don't know you. So I know on Instagram you go by Multi-Role Woman. Mm-hmm. Such a cool name.
Thank you.
And I know that you navigate so many roles in so many spaces. But before we talk about all the different roles and how you navigate it, can you take us back to a little bit of, the beginning of Ida and how you came to become the multi-role woman?
Sure. So I guess by beginning, I'm guessing you mean childhood.
Yeah.
I was not your typical kid, very distracted, sort of like all over the place. ADD, essentially ADD, not diagnosed yet. Life was good for me. Like I had a great childhood, great parents. I think life was more difficult for my parents, trying to deal with me.
Right.
In fact, my mom tells me now, she's like, it's incredible to see what you've been able to accomplish considering the challenges we had with you when you were a kid.
Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah, and I feel like, and I love this whole idea that successful parenting is not about producing good children. It's about producing healthy adults. So right. I told my mom, like, you are a successful parent because I feel like I'm a healthy and mature adult today. And even though my childhood, I guess, wasn't easy for you, but it was
right.
it was fun. It was good for me. I had a fun time.
Wow. What were like some challenges?
Mainly just not being able to focus in school. So I just sailed through school, not really learning. I actually, in fact, restarted my education when I was 30.
Wow.
I was married with kids. I decided I need to get on this. I don't feel like I had a proper education.
Wow.
And, not because of the school system per se, it was really just my inability to focus in a time where ADD was not on the map and people didn't understand it. So, I had a late start in life.
Wow. First of all, that's amazing that you had the conviction to start learning at 30 or continue learning. Because I feel like, especially at a time when if you have kids and just life is so busy.
Yeah, I think if I understood the magnitude of the task of getting educated, especially for me,
right.
I wouldn't have done it. I think it was very much about let me just see. My sister-in-law actually had moved I lived in Columbus, Ohio at the time.
Oh. And
my sister-in-law moved with her husband and her kid, and I had, 2 kids at the time. And she enrolled in college in Columbus, and it wasn't on my radar at the time.
Right.
And I was like, oh, maybe I should try this. So I went to a local community college. I took a placement test. I placed in 3rd grade math. I placed in English as a second language.
Wow.
I grew up in Montreal, so everything is French there, and
Right.
So I didn't learn in English really. We learned in French. So I took I think 2 years of developmental courses just to get me onto college level.
Wow.
And at that point, I just didn't stop. I continued. And I didn't stop until, I completed graduate school 10 years later. It took me a while.
And how, you would say because the ADHD affected the ability to learn, or how did it?
Yeah, it was, I would say now looking back, yes, it was the ADHD. I just couldn't focus.
Right.
But interestingly enough, had I been able to focus, and this is where I believe that every step of the journey is really exactly as it should be. Had I maybe not had ADHD, let's just play that card. If things were different, then when I finished high school, I would have been done with school.
Right.
Like a lot of my friends, who did well. So I feel like because I struggled and I had to restart and relearn, I had the opportunity, first of all, to enjoy the learning so much more.
Wow.
I didn't take it for granted. And then to just to prove to myself that I can overcome a challenge, even if it's like a attention deficit challenge in school. Doesn't change in college. I mean, it was hard, but I did it.
Wow. And it for sure helps with confidence and just overall, I feel, my husband, he grew up Satmar. So he basically didn't have much of an education, especially because he also has ADHD. and they're not really learning. They're not like engaged, like unless you're like really a studious person in the Satmar school system, you're also falling through the cracks. So and he speaks Yiddish at home. So English is something that also similar to, even though you sound like you're fluent in English, is something that he struggles with. And I see that it affects confidence, because if you're not sure, just overall, like expressing your thoughts, in a conversation. So I think that having that determination to go and continue learning, which is a huge undertaking for anyone, even without children. So
Right.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and to people with ADHD, because I speak to a lot of people who have it, I throughout my educational journey, I also became a certified ADHD coach.
Wow.
So, and it was very interesting because I was learning about myself,
Right.
And my brain and how they're a little different. But what I learned is that, so many things, but primarily that the ADHD people we're canaries in the coal mine, meaning like all the things that help us help everybody.
Right.
Because everyone gets distracted sometimes. Everybody gets them, but there's impulsivity issues with many people who have ADD. So all these things that I learned in my life, I knew could help other people.
Wow.
Anybody, really. So that became the gift of, that I received through the struggle of ADD, is that I learned tools to help me navigate my sometimes challenging experience, and that in turn helped people who don't have ADD. It's not, we live in a distracted world.
Right.
So
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, I feel like more and more people are getting diagnosed, or more people feel like they.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's something you could acquire even.
There is a biological, underpinning, meaning it's a biological thing, and people will argue that. Some people think ADD doesn't exist.
Right.
All the research and data,
Right.
points to the fact that it does.
Right.
But there's definitely like an ADD environmental sort of experience, meaning like some people are let's say kids who are raised with devices, they can't get off their device for hours on end. Obviously that's going to result in them not being able to focus as easily, for sure. But ADD is real.
And also maybe ADHD children gravitate more towards those devices, even though everybody struggles with it.
Right.
But it might be something that is much more of a challenge for them.
For sure.
Wow. So you completed school, you completed college, you completed school?
Yeah, I did my undergrad, I did graduate school. I finished with a 4.0 GPA, which was shocking, not just for me, but for my people who know me well, know that like, Ida, is that you? Like it really I didn't feel like I could.
That's incredible.
And yeah, so just
inspiring. What degree did you get?
I'm a psychotherapist by profession. I got a degree in mental health counseling and the coaching certification. So my undergrad was in psychology.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So that's definitely a few roles right there. Incredible. And so when did you open your account of Multi-Role Woman? When was that?
That was when I was in graduate school. What I used to do was, how like sometimes you'll read a book or an article, or you'll even watch something, and you immediately feel like, oh my God, I have to tell this person to watch it. Right. Or like this person, or if you're sitting next to your husband, you're like, you've got to hear this, right? So just listen to this real quick, because you think it's so insightful and it changes your perspective. Yeah. So every time I had that moment, whether it was from a book, from my textbook, from a professor at school, from even from a movie, from a lecture, I would immediately want to write it down. I had this like urge to write it down. I don't know where it came from. Maybe just I felt like one day I would need to remember it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to forget. Right. So I started this Word document, which now is a Google Doc, and I would write everything down, everything I wanted to remember. And then eventually I had all this information. I didn't know what to do with it. I felt like I want to share this somehow, but how am I going to do it? I don't speak. I'm not really like out there. So I called this, and this is where it's literally one little step can lead you into a whole world that you never thought you would enter into. So during that period, I had reached out to a business mentor, just to get some advice on what to do about like all the opportunities that were coming my way. I wasn't sure Mic Drop was for me, but at the same time, I felt like there were aspects of it that I thought were important. Right. So I wanted to like sort of find direction through that experience. I reached out to her and she's like, you have all this information. Why don't you just start a blog?
Oh, wow.
And I just hadn't thought of it. So I started the blog and I took all that content.
The blog separate to Instagram? This was like before.
This was before Instagram. Yeah.
Like
I mean, I had like a personal account on Instagram, but I started, so I called this person who helped me create a website, and I adapted like all the stuff into cohesive, easier to understand articles, and I just put them out. Wow. And then I started, so I changed my Instagram name to Multi-Role Woman. Oh, wow. That became the name because as a distracted woman, and I feel like any woman could relate to this, we play so many roles, we have so many hats to wear. It's like we're often not moving in one direction. It's like we pivot here, we pivot there, we find a new track. And like, I wanted to reframe distracted to dynamic. Like maybe we're distracted, but there's another side to that. Right. So Multi-Role Woman became like the channeling of what could have been negative, which is distracted all over the place, into something positive, which is we're multi-role, we are dynamic, we're always changing. Right. So that's where it came from. We're always changing. Yeah. And I remember like when I started my business, it was like a big craze of like boss babe, boss woman, like multitasking. That was like a big one. Like, oh, I could do this and that and this. And then as I started to realize like, oh, I can't do everything all at once. So that would be either distracted or just this like super heroine, where she becomes a martyr really. Right. And then focusing more on actual single tasking, doing one thing at a time. You could do a lot, but one thing at a time. That I remember having that shift. So that's why I love Multi-Role Woman, because we could have tons of roles, but it doesn't, and I think the distraction comes from when we're doing all of it at once. Right. It's like you feel like you're all over the, Right. That's an interesting point, because I think that what you're highlighting is that, so the distracted part is we're all over the place. We're constantly like martyring ourselves and like we never have time to breathe. And then the reframing of that, which is like dynamic multi-role, is that it's just a framework. Like we are multi-role women. Exactly. Most women in this world are multi-role women. But being a multi-role woman doesn't mean that you're constantly drowning in all the stuff that you have to do. Yeah. It means that you're finding a direction where like you, for example, you have so many different hats that you wear. Yeah. You have your wig company, you have the podcast, you have like your activism, like you do so much. The goal is to be able to continue to move into this multidimensional world, but with a sense of presence. Yeah, exactly. And also not feeling like you're here, but you're somewhere else. Yeah. And both can happen. Like exactly. And even when someone is not doing a lot of things, meaning I think being a mom in itself is a lot. Yeah. If someone has even a few children or even one, it could be very overwhelming just to take care of somebody else's needs all the time. Even a wife, with a husband. And I find that sometimes as women, we literally get lost, and I'll just talk for myself, get lost because it's so easy to focus on someone else in everything that we have to do, from dinner to shopping to getting ready to school, getting ready to camp, all that stuff. And then it's almost like, what do you mean? I'm a mom. This is who I am. And we define ourselves by these roles. And we forget I'm also a woman and I'm also a person and I have my own needs. And I find that that's where I was struggling a lot with this boss, like when I was starting my business, and it was like, this was my new definition. Like I'm this businesswoman, and it was like either I'm a mom or I'm a businesswoman, and forget about me personally. Like I totally lost myself in the process. So I think even if someone doesn't have so much going on, like in terms of activities or extra or business, or even just being a mom is a role, not even just, it's a huge role. And making time, I think, for ourselves, for our own growth, our own health, our own, well-being is also a role, and it needs time to be watered and nurtured. 100%. I think whether you're a mom or a businesswoman or a entrepreneur or working, whatever you're doing, I think the big question you have to ask yourself is, am I present in this experience, no matter what it is? I think people are stuck in roles like, is it okay to just be a mom? There's no such thing as just a mom.
Right.
Your mom is, being a mom, being a parent is your primary, it really is a primary role.
Yeah.
It takes precedence over everything.
Right.
And any mother who works can
exactly.
attest to that. Meaning, if you're at work and there's a family emergency, you're running home, right? If you're alone with your kid and there's a work emergency, you're not leaving your kid to,
Right.
But so the question is, are you being present? Are you being honest? I'm saying you, but I'm saying I ask myself this all the time. Am I being honest with myself? And am I telling the truth? Meaning, like, a lot gets lost in the surface. And sometimes it's like, even when we get angry, anger is a secondary emotion. Beneath anger, there's always pain. So when I find myself getting triggered, it's like, am I willing to be present enough to go deeper and to say, I'm feeling very insecure right now. Right. I'm not really sure how to say this, but just to say it, like, to feel like, and when that happens, when we're truthful, honest, there's an alignment. You feel like your nervous system is calm.
Wow.
And I feel like beneath all of that, beneath the multi roles, that really is the core of everything.
Yeah, that's the underlying thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you're doing.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. I know I have friends who are stay-at-home moms who are, I look up to them because they are so present with their kids and they're in it. And I have friends who are stay-at-home moms who are checked out.
Right.
I have friends who are working, who are checked out. I have friends who are working, who are present. That's what it's about. Exactly.
For me, I find that the difference between when I'm present and when I'm not, first of all, it's a constant re-stepping into the moment.
Yeah.
Like losing myself and recommitting, re-coming back. And it's like literally something that changes from minute to minute.
Right.
But I find that the difference is when I'm not present, it's usually I'm not taking care of myself.
Right.
And I find that it's so easy to lose ourselves in those roles when there's so many things that seem more important than movement or going to a therapy call if I have to figure out a babysitter or whatever it is. I feel like everything feels like it's more urgent.
Right.
And maybe not everyone struggles with that, but it took me a long time to realize my needs are essential to the people around me.
Right. Right.
Because it feels counterintuitive.
For sure. And I think it requires, like you said, constant reevaluation. It's not like, okay, now I'm making the rules for the next 10 years and it's always going to work. And so Rabbi Sachs said, and I love this, he said, we sacrifice what's important for what's urgent.
Oh, wow.
Meaning it's like we need to be able to discern between important and urgent. Urgent being like the emails, the this didn't get done. I mean, like the surface stuff. Important being like, nurturing your soul.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like so many of us, again, I'll talk just for myself.
Yeah.
I literally operate in this sense of urgency.
Right.
Like everything is urgent, everything is important. And it's like, I'm just running after my own tail. When I'm good and committed to my self-care and all of that stuff, I'm much more in flow and much more present. So it's such a...
Most of us do. I think you're speaking for many women, like many people.
Right.
Is that it's very hard to not get lost in the urgency of life's, daily tasks. Jordan Peterson shared, and I really like this because it makes it not very easy, but easier for us to be present and to be in important mode.
Yeah.
He said, if you feel like, and we all have this feeling like sometimes maybe triggered or like we don't feel a sense of calm in our day-to-day life. And by the way, people could be calm even in chaos.
Right.
So it's not even like because life is hectic, I can't be calm. You could be calm in the chaos.
Yeah.
You could. So he says, if you're feeling out of sorts, doesn't matter what you're dealing with, anxiety, depression, you just can't manage your day-to-day life. There's a basic checklist that I used to ask, Jordan says, I used to ask all of my clients when they came in and they were dealing with something. Did you eat? Did you sleep?
Right.
Did you move your body? Are you engaging yourself in a task that is slightly above your level of comfort? Slightly above your level of comfort. And there are several other things, but meaning like, before you go to like, I can't manage life, just those are like you said, the basics, like self-care, taking care of yourself. That's where it starts,
So it's so true and it's so interesting. I find that my issue started with not taking care of myself, which is so in a way ridiculous, but in a way I totally see how it can happen to maybe other people, where I grew up in a very religious Chabad community system, and we learned and I grew up in this beautiful, wholesome, pure, truth bubble of Torah and holiness and Hasidus. I went to Benos Menachem growing up, so it was very it was very small at the time because it was in the beginning. Very beautiful in a way, but also everything that we were learning was so much about character refinement and building. And actually, every time I talk to people today, they're like, "What? You sound like a boy, like a guy that learns. Like, this is not the way girls learned." I'm getting that often. So it could be that we were much more, we were taught like more of the, I don't know, I guess, guys are learning it in a different way than girls, I suppose. But everything that we learned, I took to heart, and I took almost to this like perfectionist format, where it's like, oh, I could just have Hiskafia, I could just not have that cookie or not have that. It's for Hashem. I think the idea of like perfectionism, of like, of having, even the reason why people get scattered and distracted, it's like you want to do everything, and you want to do everything amazing, and you want to do everything well and perfect. And that whole concept, I think, is faulty, because we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. And the idea is really we can only do one thing truthfully and fully at one time. We only have 1 minute at a time.
Were you a perfectionist in school? Like, did you feel like you always wanted to?
I was definitely always competitive and always doing the best. So yeah, I always was, I would say that I was I guess that's perfectionism. I never thought of myself as a perfectionist. Only recently I'm starting to realize, and I'm starting to also realize how perfectionism is the Yetzer Hara. Yeah. Even though it always felt like, oh, I'm just trying to be the best Jew I could be, you know?
Right. There's a very subtle difference between the Yetzer Hara, the ego, and the godly soul. Like it tries to imitate the godly soul. It tries to act like, oh, I'm looking out for you. Need to do this perfectly. I'm looking out for your best interest, because if you don't, everything will fall apart. Right. It's like this. We watched this movie, Inside Out 2. The original Inside Out. It's a Disney movie, but it's amazing. It's a kids movie, but I think I enjoyed it more than my kids did. It just highlights every emotion has a name, and it has it's like a character, and it helps you like identify the different, that we have different parts of us. And sometimes, so for the sake of like what we're talking about, I feel like the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, each one has a voice, like the animal soul, the godly soul, and we just need to learn how to separate them from one another. And it's a very hard thing to do. And what happens in like a situation where, let's say you want things to be perfect, perfection, first of all, is the enemy of good, they say, but perfection is about control. So if I want things to be perfect, what I'm essentially saying is I get to control the outcome of things. It's in my control. And I'm removing Hashem from the picture. It's like, Hashem, I got this. I'm going to make it perfect. Right, that's so true. Not realizing that the outcome is completely not in my hands. Right. And I think so many people, this is where we struggle, is realizing that we don't have any control. Like, I have a very close friend whose son is in the IDF, and she had a very, obviously very difficult time when he went. He's American. He's a lone soldier. He decided to stay actually and become a commander. And she was drawn to Shara B'Tachon during that time when he went to the army. And she's told me something that I'll never forget. She said, I pray equally for all my children. Wow. Why? Because I realized that even though one of my kids is literally in the line of danger in Gaza, I have zero control over any of my kids. So I have to just let Hashem do his work. I can't. So why am I acting like I have? We have no control. Right. With anything.
We have no idea. Right. Exactly. It's like crossing the street could be just as as dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, anything can happen.
Right.
It's so true, and it's so powerful, and it leaves us with we let go of the burden of believing we have control. And we don't.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we don't. Doesn't mean that we don't have to engage and do things.
Right.
But I think that someone with bitachon, someone who really works on their connection to Hashem, and I work on it daily because it doesn't come naturally to me.
Right.
I feel like I can't believe what it's done for me in my life. Like most of the things that 5 years ago I would have laughed if you told me, like, oh, learn Sha'ar Bitachon, start davening. Like I literally had in school, I would like mouth the words when the principal was looking through the window. Like I wasn't saying it. Like I was not connected. I wasn't. That's why we were talking about like the from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's such an important point about growing up from. And not really being connected to it, because I find that in a way it's so much sadder, because when you grow up without truth, for example, like let's say, just with toxic ideas, toxic beliefs, selfishness, or no God, it's easier, or let's say with abuse, like real abuse, it's easy to say, this is bad, this is wrong, I need to leave. Right? That's why they say most people that are in a really abusive marriage, it's easier for them to leave than when things are just not good, but not necessarily bad enough to leave, Yeah. It's like I always say, like when someone has twins or triplets, they're much more likely to get help than if you just have one baby.
Right. Yeah. It's like when you need Hashem so badly, that's when you surrender. But then you realize, like, oh wow, that's where my struggle became such a gift, because had I not been through so I quote Chase Taub a lot because I really love his work and I like how he shares things. He shared something that what you just said reminded me of that. He said that he was at a recovery retreat for recovering alcoholics, and he said somebody came up and shared a story that stuck with him, and now it's stuck with me. A woman was saying that she was in her third marriage. And so her first two marriages, she was married to alcoholics. And then finally, after she got divorced the second time, she went to Al-Anon, which is the recovery for families of alcoholics. And she healed through that experience. Then she started dating again. And someone set her up, and the guy came to pick her up. And when he got to her door, he rang the bell, she opened the door, and she smelled alcohol on his breath. And she said, is it me or am I smelling alcohol? And he said something like, oh, I just had a drink, big deal. And she slammed the door in his face.
Wow.
And she said, I would have never been able to do that with my first two husbands because I wasn't in a space where I had the clarity to know what a dysfunctional situation looks like.
Right.
So to that point, like the clarity that she had, that's the clarity that is accessible to us, but most of us don't reach that point until we go through something really, really hard. And then we're like, oh my gosh, Hashem, I need you. Like I'm giving this to you, I'm handing it to you. And then at that point.
Right. And that's when people say, like, why do we have to have pain? And obviously we don't want to wish pain on anyone, and we definitely don't want to experience it. But that's where we could actually transmute the darkness into the light. Only really if we're able to. Some people just suffer through the pain without actually seeing the light.
Right.
I got to a place where thank God I got to this place, because it took a while, where every hardship and pain, I really, like I have a sister, she's like, oh, I would never want to go through that again. And I totally understand. It's like a lot of hard, horrible experiences that you would never want to experience again. I, thank God, could say now that every hardship that I experienced, I would do it again, because it got me to the level of understanding that I only have because of those experiences.
Right.
So even the most pain, and this is why I believe, really, because like I learned it, but I didn't understand it. The idea that souls pick their parents and pick their children, like we pick our challenges.
Yeah.
Because the soul knows what we need to rectify, and to get to where we need to go.
Right. So isn't that amazing how, looking back, like if I were to ask you, do you want to have these struggles moving forward? Of course you'd say no.
Right.
But only looking back can we have the hindsight, benefit of hindsight. So that's what bitachon is. I don't think a person needs to struggle. If someone's going through something now, if you're going through something now, anyone listening, think about that. Like, when you have the benefit of hindsight, you understand it in the grander scheme of things. But right now, it seems like, how am I going to overcome this?
Right.
So to people who are struggling, it's like, just know that you might not be able to connect the dots now, but you will one day. Right. And for people who aren't struggling, everyone struggles, but who aren't like feeling the weight of something that they need to hand over or like surrender, Shara B'Tachon actually gets you to that space of not having to struggle to be able to, surrender.
Yeah, that's amazing. I do think everyone struggles. Some people don't accept that they're struggling.
Right.
They just won't, not that they won't admit it because they're embarrassed. They just will not. They'll be like, no, this is not struggling. I'm fine. And I think the question to ask yourself if you're struggling or not is, do you feel good? Are you happy? I think everybody that feels good and is happy, and not when you're high or on a vacation, but in real life, if you're happy, I think that's a very good barometer of, are you struggling or not? You know? Right. And not to say that when you're struggling, you can't be happy or feeling good. But yeah, I feel like there's a balance between being passive with life and just being like, oh, everything's good and I want to stay here, versus expanding and growing. Right. And with that growth, and that birth comes contractions and pain. So it's a process. But
I love that analogy. Like, with birth comes contractions and pain. Yeah. Yeah, because pain is not bad. People think pain is bad. Right. Pain means you're living and you're experiencing the range of emotions that Hashem created us with.
Exactly. That makes it human, which I actually love the idea of pain is inevitable, like that's life, like contractions, and suffering is actually a choice.
Yeah.
Suffering is when we really are not accepting the reality of the situation. So we're in the present moment and we're resisting just the truth of what is, and we're trying to change it or pretend like it's not there. And once we surrender, which is what you're sharing about Shara B'Tachon, is really just surrendering with the reality, and then it's still going to be painful, but I think then we could move on faster once we deal with the reality.
For sure. I always like to think of these concepts that sometimes are hard to wrap our heads around in like the simplest analogies, because it gets me remembering them better. And another Sheish Tav, I feel like I'm quoting Sheish Lat today, but
I love him.
yeah, he's really great. Yeah. He said that in the middle of the night he wakes up and he's going to use the restroom, and on the way he steps on a piece of Lego, and he's like, ouch. So ouch is the pain. And then after he says ouch, he's like, why does this always happen to me? Right. Why does this always happen to me? That's the suffering. That's the distinction. Like, pain is what happened. Suffering is the story I'm telling myself about it. So why is this always happening to me? I mean,
and like a victim mindset.
Yeah.
I think what's so amazing about Sheish Taub Rabbi Sheish Taub, is that he makes himself so human and so relatable. And I think that's the best way to learn from people, is when they humanize themselves. And as much as he's such a incredible genius and rabbi and just, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but he never puts himself as like above challenges or above experiences. He's always bringing personal stories, or it's just incredible. Such a gift.
Yeah.
I would love to segue into the whole hair covering conversation. So you've been covering your hair since you're married.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you've been married a while, right?
Yeah, almost 21 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about the journey of hair covering from when you were just married, newly married, to that journey of how it started, how you felt about it in the beginning, and did it get deeper? Did you understand more with time, and how it is today?
Yeah. So when I started covering my hair, I mean, I was raised in a home where my mother covered her hair, very carefully, and my sisters all cover their hair. So it was sort of like just a given that I would too, but I didn't go into it with an appreciation for, the spiritual component of hair covering. I just was going through the motions, not like at all any deeper than that. I did have my struggles with hair covering, meaning like, when we went to the beach, when we went on vacations, like sometimes it was harder. It was definitely a journey. I think I would say the last probably year, just the last year, it's gotten interesting because it became, on one hand, more of a challenge for me going into like full hair covering, but less of a challenge.
You mean before it wasn't full hair covering?
I used to take my hair out. I took my hair out, and like I just sometimes like it was more of a toupee, meaning like there's levels. Meaning I felt like I was at a good level while I was there, and then I was always nervous about growing in that department because I thought like once I go there that can I go back, and I still like today struggle with that. It's like I miss taking hair out in the front because it's hard to get. It's just hard.
Makes such a difference.
It's not easy. I think the more I got to not appreciating the mitzvah per se, I feel like I'm still working on that.
Right.
Just appreciating that I don't have to understand everything I'm doing. In fact, most of the things that I started doing that I never thought I would do, I thought I would eventually cover my hair less, not more. That was not the trajectory I was going on.
Right.
Most of the things I started to do that were not in my nature, or that I felt like, why am I doing this? It's all these, I have many reasons not to, ended up making my life like significantly more meaningful and more purposeful. So that's where trust came in. It's like, I don't know, I still don't fully appreciate the mitzvah of hair covering. I have to be honest. I really don't.
I think it's amazing that you could be that committed to a mitzvah from that place of trust.
I'm working on it.
Right.
I'm working on it. Like I'm not,
because you're saying
I'm not an unwavering b'tachon person. I'm not. Like I really struggle daily with many aspects of, religious observance.
Right.
Really most aspects. And I think that I'm not, maybe I'm not where I want to be, but I know that I'm choosing to move in one direction. So if I'm not, it's like with life, you're moving it. If you're not moving forward, it's like with your house. If you're not, if you do nothing in your house, it'll accumulate dust.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if I'm not moving forward, I'm moving backward.
Yeah. So
I have to choose a direction. Forward is harder than backward.
Right.
In the short term, for sure. But in the grander scheme of things, forward is a better option.
Wow.
It's a better option, but it's not easy. And I know that there's concept, there's a price of admission for everything we do.
Yeah.
So if I choose to go, I'm giving something up. I'm paying a price. If I choose to not grow and not change, I'm paying a price. If I choose to change, I'm paying a price.
Yeah.
So the question is, am I willing to pay the price that goes along with the choice I'm making? So the choice of becoming more religiously observant or more connected to Hashem, maybe the cost of that, the price I'm paying is that in the short term, it might be more annoying. Like, I don't always want to put a shaitel on in the morning. Like, it's not, certain things are just annoying in the moment. But it's like exercising. Let's just use that as an example. It's like, it's annoying to exercise.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the big picture and I'm thinking in the grander scheme of things, I know it's the better choice for me. Even if I don't fully ascribe to it. Like, oh, I don't really need to exercise. Like, I'll be fine. We all make our calculations.
Wow. It's amazing because I find that a lot of us, we are all limited in our understanding and in our vision and in our experiences. Like, we're all humans, we're all blindsided by things. And yet to be able to trust yourself that that this is what you want to do, even if you don't feel it in the moment. Or like working out, like trusting that that after the workout you're going to feel better, you know?
Right.
And having that trust, I think, is amazing.
Yeah.
And hair covering is such a sensitive topic for so many people. Also, even just being able to admit that it's hard, I think, is huge. I feel like as a society we're going away from that a lot, but and I'm sure there's still communities that everything needs to sound amazing and everything needs to, be perfect. Yeah, I would never not cover my hair and, have all these kinds of, fake conversations when really it's a struggle and when really it's tough and it's a huge ask.
Right.
So I think it's amazing to be able to recognize that it's hard, and the fact that you still do it with that trust, I think, is amazing. I definitely struggled. So like you also, in the beginning of time, it was just a given. Like,
Right.
you know, it was like something I was actually looking forward to because it was like a rite of passage. You know, you get married, it's like a status.
Right.
So that was something that was exciting, if anything, in the beginning. And then it was like, after a while, first of all, I didn't have nice wigs. And when I started my business, the wigs that I made I felt really amazing in and felt so natural. So for me, it was right away, I jumped into the business aspect of just sharing these amazing wigs. Again, no, not necessarily the mitzvah involved. Like the mitzvah was a given. Yeah, we all cover our hair. These are amazing natural wigs. You know, you could feel like yourself again. And then when I went on this journey, I got divorced, took off my wig, and I was like older. So I got married at 19. So when I was older, and it was a totally different experience having my hair versus when I was younger and not really autonomous and not really self-sufficient. So it was a totally different experience. And once I had that freedom with my hair, even just putting it in a bun or a pony, and then so that was for a couple of years, especially after covering for 7.5 years. That was amazing. It was like, oh my goodness, I never want to cover my hair again, you know?
Right.
And then I was, for a while before I got divorced, every single day in the salon, you know, I would ask women, why do you cover your hair? And I guess I got so like distressed over all these conversations that I was having where women just didn't know why they were covering their hair.
Right.
Like, oh, my family, my mother, my this, my that. Sometimes I would get a woman with like real faith and, you know, real inspiration that kept me going for a little bit.
Right.
Really, I was looking for it within myself, but I
Yeah.
didn't have it within myself. I was asking all these women.
That's amazing that you did that. That you
Yeah, it was
wanted
a
to
very
understand other
curious-
people's experience.
Yeah. And I was in this industry,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of women just really weren't connected, but they were still doing it, which I also thought was so beautiful in that simplicity of like that
Right.
simple faith
Yeah.
of just still doing it, even though they're not really connected to it. But I was kind of getting, you know, like there was this negative thing brewing within me where it's like, I don't understand, like all these women don't even know why they're doing it. Why are we doing this? Like
Right.
kind of like this sadness and
Yeah,
anger that
yeah.
was brewing.
Yeah.
And eventually, I started dating someone that wasn't really religious. Just things started to, you know, one thing led to the next. I
Right.
started to get desensitized and not excited about religion and just burnt out. But I was always a spiritual seeker. So I was always learning and looking for things, but I wasn't practicing.
Right.
And then when I was always connected to Hasidus and always connected to, but without practicing, I wasn't committed. I was just learning, like intellectually, it was fascinating.
Right.
And it's the idea that we grew up with truth, so but without necessarily that appreciation because we didn't find it ourselves.
Right.
So like we take it for granted.
Right.
But here I was starting to kind of reclaim a little bit of it on my own. But then I started dating my husband. And he's amazing. He has a very pure, simple faith where he never deviated from. He never had that like space where he had to stop keeping to feel it. You know, he always just like a pure soul, really. And so I kind of just went back into the motions, kind of like, you know, like where you don't ever forget to drive.
Right.
And I got to the stage where I was like, 1 second, I'm like back. Like, it took me back to, you know, like 10 years before, where I'm like just doing it. I'm like, wait, I can't get back here. Like
right.
So that's where I'm just like gonna do it and then get burnt out.
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I have to understand this deeper. I have to understand it more, what's going on. And so that's really the idea of this podcast is to get deeper with the wig, with hair covering. And I find it fascinating that the Rebbe was so into a sheitel specifically. And he actually started the movement. Like people would come from Russia they weren't really wearing wigs. It was more, anyone that was covering their hair was probably with tichels, it wasn't really with wigs. But even though I think some of the Rebbitzins had wigs.
Yeah.
But it definitely wasn't a common thing. But I find now, recently, so many women are overburdened, exhausted with just family life and they're very pure and very frum and very holy. A lot of women like this, where they do what they're supposed to be doing. They don't ask. So those women, the fact that they wear wigs, to me obviously I'm sure there's other reasons that I don't know about, but the Rebbe's decision to promote wigs is these women specifically who are so detached from their femininity that would just wear a tichel, and there are women like that even today, and that's it. There would be no connection to their beauty or to their femininity. They would just like wrap their hair and forget about it,
right,
you know?
Right.
And not like making it nice with those wraps, like just simple.
Right.
And the sheitel kind of forces a woman to tap back into her hair. Even though she's covering her physical hair, the sheitel, it's like, am I going to get highlights? Am I going to get it blow dried, styled? All of this stuff is so feminine.
Right. To tap into her femininity.
Yeah, is so feminine and is so pure and holy, which often gets lost. The femininity gets kind of like, unimportant, not holy, not sacred, when it really is the most sacred.
Right.
So to me, that's something that I recently thought of, and because I meet so many women during these pop-ups, and you meet all kinds of women. Obviously, you meet women that are obsessed with their femininity a lot, as they should be, because we're women. But you meet women that are so, and I think I connect to that because to me, to connect to my femininity takes work. I'm always in my masculine, was for so long. For me to be more feminine is a process. So I connect to those women in a way, and I think I still didn't expound on it so much, but I think that is like a starting point of specifically wigs. Of course, wigs also cover more, maybe tichels have less, but I see so many women in Israel who cover completely with their tichels.
Right.
So if it's just about how much you're covering, I don't think that's enough of a reason for the Rebbe to be so insistent on wigs.
Right.
But of course, this is just a debate. Like, it's just up. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I think just hearing your story, I think you're such a trailblazer in this industry, in this world. And it just reminds me of the story of a woman who went to the Rebbe and really struggled. This was a long time ago, where sheitels were not pretty at the time. They were synthetic. And she said, I really struggle with covering my hair. And the Rebbe told her, you need to be a spiritual trailblazer, which means, like, essentially, how do trends work?
Right.
You know, how do people like suddenly become very into something? It's usually you see like a celebrity or two wearing it. Like they adapt over time too. So it's like, you could be the trailblazer, he told this woman.
Wow.
And you start it and watch, and then maybe other people will follow you. Why do you have to follow? Oh, I think she also said, other people aren't wearing one. Why should I be the one to wear one? Because there's two wig Rebbe stories. One was that, and the other one was where the Rebbe actually wrote this woman a check to buy herself the best possible sheitel. I don't know if this was the same woman or two different women, but the point is, just because it's hard, just because other people don't connect to it, just because, I don't connect to it, it doesn't mean that I don't have an opportunity. So I feel like what you've done in your lifetime is like, you wore a wig, you struggled with that connection. Like we said earlier, sometimes you have to lose God to find God.
Yeah.
So, and now and your podcast is called Oh My God, which is amazing. Like, so you're on this journey of kind of figuring out how to understand this mitzvah of hair covering.
Yeah.
And it could last a lifetime.
Yeah.
It's not like one day the lights will turn on and suddenly I'll have all the answers.
Right.
And I know, I'm aware from my own life and all the challenges that I experience with hair covering and others as well, is that I'm not going to wake up one day and suddenly everything is like la la land, beautiful, rosy, whatever. I'm going to change my attitude for sure about life. I'm going to work on my bitachon, which it's a muscle.
Right.
I'm not going to wake up one day with unwavering bitachon. All the things that we do, it's like we're works in progress.
Yeah.
So I think in the realm of like hair covering, at least for me, watching your journey and watching you on Instagram and sharing your story and like being vulnerable and open about your struggle, I connected to it. And I think so many women, say with confidence, I would imagine a lot of women connect to that. And it's really special. It's very special.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. But what I want to also say to your point that you just said about you're not going to wake up one day with all, the bitachon or all the answers. I think that's why it's so amazing that we don't lose the action. Like doing it regardless, because especially that one day we're going to have more clarity and more understanding, like a deeper appreciation is beautiful.
Right.
But we shouldn't lose sight of the action. So that's why I always have to learn by experience. Some people learn by other people's mistakes. I'm going to take it off and I'm going to do it and, kind of feel that void and then to come back.
Right.
But really it's beautiful when that doesn't have to happen, where you know enough to trust yourself and to trust what you're seeing as truth, as this is the right thing, even if it's hard. Right. And only by committing to the growth and only by committing to learning about it could you actually have more appreciation and understanding for it. That's why I'm definitely committed to learning it while still keeping the shaitel on, because I've the more I learn, the more connected I am to the mitzvah.
Yeah. I feel the same way. There's a mantra that I almost live by. On our podcast, we interviewed Dennis Prager, and I asked him, and he's spoken to hundreds of thousands of people in his lifetime. I asked him, what's the best advice he ever received? And he said, it came from his Rebbe in yeshiva, I think in 4th grade. He didn't want to daven mincha. And his Rebbe came to him and said, "No, why are you not davening mincha?" And he said, "I'm not in the mood." So the Rebbe said, "So what if you're not in the mood?"
Right.
He said, "That's the best advice I ever got. So what if you're not in the mood?"
Right.
Meaning, I might not be in the mood to cover my hair this morning. I might not be in the mood to do, whatever it is that I know in the grander scheme of things would probably be good. But so what?
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Am I going to struggle more tomorrow? Maybe.
Right.
Maybe. But this morning I chose to wake up and I chose to put on my shaitel.
Right.
And that's my journey for today.
Right.
And I hope that I can continue in this direction. I mean, life throws curveballs that we don't anticipate. And I could say from personal experience, it's usually the things that you would least expect.
Wow.
So another reason to have bitachon, because you think you have no idea.
Right. Or
Hashem is running things.
Control. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another thing about hair covering, though, that I think is also very fascinating is, and again, this takes faith to believe. Like everything, it takes faith to believe it, because it takes one comment to be like, oh, so you believe that? But God also, who says God exists? It's a belief. Right. We believe that God exists. We choose to believe it. And through that choice of belief, we feel it. We feel it more by believing it.
Right.
So even though I'm sure there's a lot of evidence, but some people don't need the evidence. They want to believe it. They feel it, and they do it. They do things that God said that they need to do because they believe that He exists. So the same with hair covering, where a woman's power, again, back to the femininity, is really in her hair, which sounds a little bit ridiculous because it's like, what's hair? Some communities shave their hair. We, as a society, not only in the Jewish world, universally, it became such a, now things are becoming more feminine, but it was so masculine for so long. Predominantly, the way the world works is very logical and very cutthroat, and and femininity was always considered a little crazy, manic, voodoo, or whatever. Yeah. Things now are changing, and Mashiach times is going to be more feminine, but a woman's power, this is what I learned in Hasidus, is really in her hair. And I find it, first of all, fascinating for women that lose their hair as they age or through disease. And I believe that not just I believe, but it's scientifically proven, that a lot of our diseases come from stored, pent-up trauma and emotions that we don't release. So I think it's all connected, even though, again, logic could say, no, this is a disease and this is hair loss and this is aging and this is whatever. But a woman's power is really in her hair. And actually going back to the beginning of our conversation where we're talking about scattered and distracted, when a woman doesn't cover her hair, she's not channeling the power into focused family or, her husband, intimacy. A lot of it, we just learned it as, oh, it's not tznius, or it's, this is the halacha, this is it, this is what you need to do. But really it comes from this idea of a woman is gvura, which is tznius, femininity is more like channeling, basically guarding and protecting.
Right.
And that is the idea of hair covering, is really to cover and to protect our energy, which, by the way, they say a man's parnasa comes from the woman. And it for this reason. And that's why a lot of women who I know actually started to cover their hair, they say that their husbands do so much better financially since covering their hair.
Right.
So it's very interesting. But again, it's something that we could choose to believe or choose to not feel connected to because it's hard.
Right.
It's actually interesting what you were saying that when you're covering more, you don't want to go backwards.
Right.
So it's kind of scary to take something on.
Yeah.
And I totally relate to that. And most women will relate to it. And I think it's interesting how we define who we are based on things we do. So it's like, if I am a woman that covers my hair, if let's say I never covered my hair, and now I'm going to cover my hair, like, oh, that means that I'm a religious woman. That means I have to do this, that, and the other. And that's kind of what I was saying about perfectionism.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to mean that. It could just mean this is what I'm doing. This specific mitzvah today, even, not even forever.
Right. Yeah. I think it's so interesting because to that thought, like, well, if I start doing it, I can't go back.
Right.
Now I'm just thinking, why am I so afraid of that? Why am I so afraid that if I start covering my hair, maybe I'll start, doing the whole davening? Like, what's just, I think it's a good question to ask ourselves. What am I afraid is going to happen if I become more observant?
Right.
Like, what's the downside, really?
For me, though, what comes up when you say that is my fear of not being sustainable, of getting burnt out from that concept of perfectionism, where I grew up, where I'm like, okay, so if I am someone that covers my top button, like I took it to extreme, then my elbows have to be this, and then I'm only going to eat chalav Yisrael, and then it feels like I'm getting to this tiny hole, and not having a life.
So you feel like it becomes like a black and white world first, like it's all or nothing, which I totally can relate to. And that it diminishes us. Like once we're like in such a small box. Yeah. I think that what we're missing, and I'm talking to myself also here, is that with Hashem, so we were talking about surrender earlier. That when we hand it to Hashem, that's where we get true freedom.
Right.
And my friends, I have several friends who are more religious. I have many friends who are less religious than I am. And this one particular friend who's more much more religious than I am, and she's always been like an unwavering. She always says life is so much easier. She said easier when people are religious. She was actually talking about her son, who's like very, very, very firmer than she is. And I thought that's so interesting. I never thought of it that way. Like to me, it's like the stringencies, the boundaries, Shabbos, kosher. It's like there's so many things that. My kitchen, it's like if someone forgets, like it's a silly example, like on Shabbos, if I forget to plug in my crock pot, and like I'm having a big crowd, like what do I do?
Exactly.
So, no judgment, but some people might just quickly have their house key. I don't know what the specific laws around that are, but I'm just saying it's scary. Yeah. But I think that if we understand that journey actually brings more freedom and not less, we might be inclined to take it on more. I'm not in a place now where I can say that I'm ready to start doing more because I'm actually still in that fear zone. Right. But I know that I'm significantly more connected and more from religious today than I was just a year ago. Yeah. 2 years ago. So
I think what your friend is saying is basically what you were saying the whole time about bitachon, when you kind of just take yourself out of the equation completely and it's like, oh, is this in alignment with Hashem or not? And it's like, those are your choices, basically, yes or no, yes or no. And when you make those decisions, it's like, it's an easy yes or no because it's like, you're so connected to what Hashem wants. Yeah. But what I think is also important is a lot of people just don't know for example, even halachas of Shabbos, it's like they don't know what to do. So if you don't know what to do, then the answer is usually no.
Right.
And the more we know, the more we have room to play with.
Right.
Actually, on Eli Nash's podcast, there was a guy, Ephraim, I don't know his last name, but incredible podcast. First of all, I love Eli Nash's podcast.
Yeah, me
but
too.
He's a science teacher and a rabbi. And he was basically reconciling a lot of questions that people have between science and Torah. And it was just proving the point of the more you know, the more things are actually very clear and not conflicting and not contradicting. And I think the same is true with, I grew up with Baal Tshuva parents who were trying their best, again, simple faith, not a lot of understanding of, actually, we could do this. Actually, and Ephraim was saying, a lot of people put themselves in a hole where they feel like, okay, they can't travel and they can't eat out and they can't do this because what are they going to do here? And a lot of it comes from ignorance.
Right.
So I think it comes down to the point where we don't have to put ourselves in a hole, and learning more and expands our capacity to make those choices. But I do understand what she means, that it's easier. Some people also are not tested as much as other people in terms of materialism, in terms of, it's easier for some people.
It's easier and it's also harder, because if you think about, imagine I just said, go play. Yeah. Go play, go have fun. You're like, where am I, but if I give you a game has rules. It's like there are guidelines, there's boundaries in place. Yeah. Then you can really, really play. Right. It's like, I actually had a dream a while ago, and it was like Hashem was saying, Ida, I'm giving you the reins. Like, you can make all the decisions you want to make. And then I remember, I got so anxious and overwhelmed. I'm like, actually, no. Oh, wow. Like, I'd rather just deal with all the crap and challenges that life gives me, but just let you take the reins. I feel like I'm this way in many different areas of my life. Right. Even with, I started a business recently, and it was very overwhelming. And I was like, I told my husband, because he's so good at, entrepreneurship and business, I'm like, could you just help me? I'd rather just give this to you, and let you take this on. So it's sort of like that. It's like we're acknowledging, if we acknowledge that Hashem does a better job running things than we do.
That's such a good analogy. And it's also fascinating to notice, if you play games with different people, some people focus on the wrong things. It's like they get so anal of the rules and the colors and this. And some people are just having a jolly time throughout the game, not really focused on those things.
Right. We're overthinkers and not overthinkers. Yeah.
And it's so interesting. The same game, same rules. We don't have to make those rules. We're all, and then some people add rules, and it's literally the same thing.
Right. Make up their own rules. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
It's so fascinating. It's such human. It's like a human nature, I guess. But we're the same, but we're also wired differently. Some of us, Yeah,
and everyone has their challenge. I mean, to someone who, to whom faith comes more easily, I really applaud them, and I look up to that. It's amazing. I know people like that.
Yeah.
But that's not me,
Right. I actually find that for some people, they need the faith for their security. It makes them feel secure in this world.
Right.
And for some people, it makes them the opposite. They don't feel secure by feeling like, oh, I have to just believe this blind faith.
Right.
So it's so interesting that it really, I think the question is, at the end of the day, action is important. Mm-hmm. And we could have the most philosophical questions and conversations, but I think that it shouldn't stop us from doing what's right. But it's hard. Right. It stopped me from doing it because I definitely went down that rabbit hole of needing to really feel it, not just being told what to feel.
Right. So the question is when you're saying I need to really feel it, and I don't want to be told what to feel. The question, it's like the chicken egg syndrome. It's what comes first? The need to feel it so that I can do it, or do I do it in order to feel? So for me, in my own experience, I feel like I had to do it first. I had to do it, and then it's like Na'aseh v'nishma, sort of. I had to do it, and meaning by doing it, I mean more specifically is learning Shar HaBitachon. I started doing it 2 years ago. My life has completely shifted since, and I did 5 minutes a day. Today I do it with several people. I do it with friends over the phone, 5 minutes a day, here and there. So I make sure to be consistent every single day. And that's the tangible, like, muscle building difference that you see, where I think anyone who's feeling a ton of anxiety because of their religious observance, that's not faith.
Right.
That's the Yetzer Hara. That's the animal soul mimicking,
Right. That's such a good distinction.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
Because if you should be feeling less anxiety if you have more faith.
Right.
And I should say faith, trust being like the ultimate goal. Like faith is emunah, trust is bitachon.
Right.
Emunah is saying, okay, like I might not be happy, but ultimately I'll understand. Bitachon, which is translated as trust or certainty, is like I'm as certain as the sunrise.
Right.
As I am when I know that the sun's going to come out at this hour, that everything that's happening in my life is exactly as it should be.
Yeah.
And that's freeing because I'm not resisting the reality that I'm in right now.
Right.
It's like if I'm struggling, and this is the issue I had as a kid, like when I didn't understand what my teacher was saying and I thought I was supposed to understand and I would nod my head, or like I struggled with davening, so I would pretend to say the words. I wasn't really saying them. What I didn't recognize is that I was allowed to be honest.
Right.
And pretending to daven, that's not faith. It's not helping me.
Exactly.
Right? It's really saying, and I was too afraid to do this, but I had friends I have one friend in particular who whenever she didn't understand something, she would just push and push until she would ask the teacher over and over again, and I connected to her in a way that I only realized recently. In fact, it's interesting because our kids just ended up in camp together.
Oh, wow.
Her daughter is 2 years older than my daughter, and they instantly connected. And I wonder if there's something, in the two of us as adults, live on two separate ends of the United States, that like nurtured that connection.
That's so interesting.
Yeah,
that's I was religious for the longest time from the pressures, societal pressures, family pressures, to fill a certain role, to be a certain way. So it wasn't faith. It was I was doing it,
right?
So that it could be it's up for debate. Like, is it still good because I'm still doing the thing,
right?
Or for me, it was the road towards not doing it because I needed to do it for the right reasons, in the right way,
right?
For me, and for my connection to Hashem.
Yeah. I think the way that things are fed and presented to us as kids really colors our experience of it, whether it's religious observance or sexuality or really anything. And I think that our responsibility is to open up our eyes, just to open our eyes and to really, I think if we open our eyes, and by open our eyes, I mean our mind's eye, like to really understand where is this coming from? Like, don't be afraid to dig a little deeper, you know, and say like, why don't I like this? Like, why don't I like fill in the blanks?
Right. And not being afraid of what the answers will be.
Right.
Kind of what you were also saying in the beginning about a successful parent is a person who has an adult, a child that becomes a self-sufficient adult, successful adult, or whatever that means, like happy and able to take care of themselves and their family and functioning, and positively impacting the world around them. And I think that for most people, for a lot of people that grew up a certain way and never left that mold and made it their own, it comes from the place of not thinking for themselves.
Right. Right.
And not having enough guts to think for themselves, because it does require that separation from our family, from our communities, from our parents, even to reconnect.
Right.
But it first requires, and it's really a part of regular development, that it really should happen in adolescence.
Right.
But for most people, it doesn't happen. So it happens, midlife crisis.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I speak to a lot of people, a lot of clients between the ages of, it's like 37 and 50. And it's interesting that a lot of things happen during that time, like the divorce rate spikes, midlife crises, and come in all different forms, happen at that stage. And I really believe that it's less about what's happening in a person's life and more about a truth that they were maybe unwilling to confront at some point, that it's never too late to confront.
Exactly.
I gave a workshop to parents of teens with ADD. And it was interesting because I don't have kids with ADD, but I have ADD.
Right.
So I was telling these parents, like, I think I turned out okay, given what I dealt with as a kid. Like I had challenges, I should say. And I think I turned out okay. And I think it's in big part because I was willing to confront the truth of what I was experiencing.
Exactly.
And that's really freeing, like being able to just, this is what I'm experiencing.
I think trusting our process and not being shut down, where often we're told as kids, you know, it's okay, it's fine, it's going to get better, it's not really that bad, it's not, and that's constantly reaffirming that we shouldn't trust ourselves.
Right. And that your kids shouldn't trust themselves. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like basically constantly disconnecting from themselves, from ourselves.
Right.
And I think that's the key to having a real relationship with Hashem, is first understanding who you are and what your experience is.
Right.
So yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that you went on this journey of your own self to connect more deeply. And it's funny, it's interesting that some people, when we were talking about pain, it's like when life sends us, softer, subtle messages, we don't really pick it up as much as when it's like
shakes you to
your core. It's like, I'm sure if little messages would get to us, Hashem wouldn't need to send us big messages.
That's true. I mean, I believe that to be true. And even from a psychological perspective, that, again, Jordan Peterson was saying, because he spent 30 years seeing clients, and now he talks a lot about mental health and our day-to-day experience and how to improve our lives. But he says that so many of the clients that he's met with, usually they come when they're in a crisis.
Right.
If he went back and connected the dots, there was always a point where he found that, that's where it started.
Wow.
Meaning, like, there's a series of events that led you to this crisis. So not that you have to go back and rehash, but just recognize that, like, you can start doing things in the direction of, going inside truth.
Right.
Things like that.
Where we just don't notice it, or we don't pay attention to those smaller inconveniences rather than like emergencies.
Right.
It's so true.
Yeah. Things always come back to
Yeah.
you. They always come back.
Wow.
Yeah. So might as well tackle them.
Yeah, exactly.
Then don't wait.
First of all, thank you so much for this. This was beautiful.
Thank you for having me.
To end off and to share something that everyone could, even though you said some amazing good points. I love the Sha'ar Bitachon and 5 minutes a day. I think that's amazing. Is there anything else, something tangible that, whether it pertains to hair covering or not, that you could leave the listeners, something that if they're going through a challenge, or maybe they're not even aware that things are necessarily bad, but a part of them is aware, but they're not ready to face it. What would be something that you would suggest or advise? Sometimes, like, a part of us knows, but we're just not ready to deal with it or to face it.
Right.
And we procrastinate.
Right. Yeah. I guess I'll share it in the form of a quote, because I love quotes.
Yeah.
Because it simplifies things for me. There's so many self-help books, so many books out there, and I think that sometimes, like, a simple one can say a lot. Do something that your future self will thank you for. So, and the smaller it is, and this is counterintuitive, it's like we feel like, I have so much to do, I'm so overwhelmed. And actually, this is something that my husband told me, because he's very efficient in life, in his days. Like, he gets so much done, and he doesn't get overwhelmed easily. And I have less going on than he does, and I tend to get overwhelmed. Right. He's like, just the next thing. Right. Literally, just your only focus right now should be on, what am I doing next?
Right.
Not like what I have to do, so much to do. This, that. No. Just the next thing. And the next thing, for me, I think there's so many little things, and for me, it's the little things that, and this is where it becomes less overwhelming to change your life.
Yeah.
Because change happens in the the minutia, the tiny little steps. And I would imagine people have heard this one before, but it's worth repeating. Just write down 3 things you're grateful for. That's it.
Right.
That's it. Because then you'll start, if you're leaning toward gratitude, your whole mindset is different. Your whole mindset shifts, and, like, you see the world through a different lens. And, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are.
Right.
And anyone could say, that they know someone whose life is more difficult than theirs, right? And they're happier.
Right.
And other people whose lives are much easier than theirs and they're more miserable. So forget what's happening in your life. That's not relevant right now. What's relevant is what you're going to do. And the more attainable your next task is, the more likely you are to change your life drastically. And I could say, like, you know, put in your calendar, literally, if you have an iPhone 5 years from now, choose a day and write, did my life get better?
Wow.
Right? And watch, like, again, watch what happens. If you go back, you could see, you know, where things started to go wrong. So then you have to it's a little slight shift. It's a slight shift.
That's so beautiful. And it goes back to that idea of presence, like the next thing. Yeah. You don't have to worry about 100 tasks, you know?
Yeah, presence, yes. That's a huge factor. It's so hard to be present. Right. But I think it's interesting because saying that even saying I don't feel present right now means you're present. Right. Because otherwise you're acknowledging that you have the presence to know that you're not being present. There's people who are like, yeah, I'm present, but they're really on their phones and not listening to their kid while they're sharing a story. Exactly. So, you know, yeah.
And I think also one key is not to be so hard on ourselves, because I think my theme in this episode is like the idea of perfectionism, where that stops us from actually changing the reality of, let's say, not being present right now. Right. Because if I'm going to deny that reality, if I'm not going to be honest with what's happening, if I'm not going to be able to admit, oh wow, I'm not present right now, which again, like you said, is actually being present with what's real and alive right now. Right. But being able to be honest and aware of what's going on makes me able to change that reality and not to be so hard on myself. Yeah, every moment I fail, every moment I succeed, it's all new, one moment after, and they all pile up, and it's all in the small moments. It doesn't have to be these grand. Right. It's not what we think. It's usually not what we think. Nothing's what we think. Right. You know, exactly. Like, look at what you. I mean, if you look at what you thought your life would be like, I don't know for others, but for myself, I can say with certainty, it's like if I'm going back 10 years and I'm thinking, did I think that I would start a podcast, which is something that, I mean, I struggle with attention, regulation, you know, and it's a difficult, I wouldn't imagine that that's where I would go, but look, here I am, here we are. Right. So you don't know. No, we don't know. It's like we really don't know. We really don't know. It's like Abraham. I like to use this example because it's interesting. Like you think Abraham, I mean, he was a tzaddik, so maybe he did know. But people in that time would imagine that there would be planes flying in the sky. I mean, it's unfathomable. Right. We have no idea. Right. We think we know, but we have no idea. We don't. Right. We don't. We really don't. Yeah. But at the same time, going back to what we were saying, it's whatever's happening now. Like I have a coach, and she, like a somatics coach, she's amazing. And she always says, whatever is happening right now is what's happening right now. Meaning, sometimes we like show up to the session, and someone's like bringing up something from you know, this other thing that she wants to be working on, or this other thing, and they're like, that's not the thing. Right. Meaning, whatever is actually bothering you right now, or not bothering you right now, whatever you do is the big thing. Like, you know, start where you are right now. You're upset at your husband right now. That's what you should look at right now. Yeah. Not like, oh, and I'm launching this thing. It's like, what is present right now is the thing. Right. Exactly. So, that was like a big aha moment for me, because it's like sometimes we're so connected to what we want to be happening or what we don't want to be happening, and we're not actually present with what is happening. Which is the life's goal, is to be present with what is happening. Yeah. And it's like also the same with hair covering. Like if I am not comfortable with hair covering right now and I'm still choosing to cover my hair, that's beautiful. But also I'm not comfortable with covering my hair right now. And instead of denying and pretending like, oh yeah, I love covering my hair, you're not being honest with what's real. It doesn't take away, it actually adds to the value that you're covering your hair, even though you don't like it. Right. You know? Right. And just because, and obviously this is specific to each person, but just because you don't want to do something, or you're not in the mood to do something, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Meaning that you have rules and values in place for your life. You know, you know what kind of life you want to live, and that takes like a balancing of sorts. Yeah. Where you have to do something, and that might come with a price. Yeah. You know, and hair covering does have a price tag, you know, connected to it. But I think so does not hair covering for someone who believes in the importance of spiritual connection and being uplifted and connecting to Hashem. So exactly, you're paying a price. Just what's the greater price for you? Yeah. That's the question. Exactly.
Yeah. And it will vary. Like you said, some people have more faith, some people have less faith. We're all, on a unique journey.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're all on a unique journey, and
Yeah.
we have to honor that.
Yeah, we really
That's
do.
so beautiful. Thank you
Really
so
do.
much.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was amazing. I feel uplifted.
Me too. Me too.
Thank
Me
you.
too. Yeah, of course.